The Man Whore Podcast is sponsored by HotMovies.com. Try out some ethical, paid-for porn for free with none of those hidden fees or secret subscriptions when you sign up at HotMovies.com and use the promo code MANWHORE. Now let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Man Whore Podcast.
Shout out to all the sissy boys, butch babes, and NBs who can do 'em both. This is Billy Procida, and you're listening to the Man Whore Podcast. All right, everyone. How you doing? Welcome back to the show. This week we have got on Jase Lindgren from the Multiamory podcast. All right. Yeah, this is an episode that's been literally years in the making, so I'm so thrilled to finally get Jase here on the show, and I can't wait to share him with y'all in just a little bit. But first, show dates, people, show dates. Okay, Tour de Man Whore tickets are now on sale. So as I explained last week, there technically are no show dates yet, but between May 15th and June 30th, oh boy, I'm taking this show on the road and possibly to a city near you. I'm pretty thrilled that like half of the cities have already started selling some tickets, so that's pretty cool, and looks like this thing's gonna happen. Brief reminder, yes, we're doing an experimental ticketing model where you can get pre-sale discounted tickets for just $10 if you're in the United States. $10 for a ticket. The catch is you don't know the date quite yet. And when I sell 20 tickets in a particular city, I'm going to book a date, I'm going to book a show, I'm going to come on over out to you. But if we do not sell those 20 tickets by the end of March and then in a city, I'm not going there this year. So you got to help me determine where Tour de Man Whore 2019 is going. Just to remind you of the 20 cities that are up for grabs. And, you know, I'm going to read them in reverse alphabetical order this time. I'm sure many of you will be like, oh man, my city, we start with a V in Victoria, wherever. And, we always got to wait so long to hear our name called. And I'm just like, you know what? I got you this time. Okay. I'm hoping to come on out to Washington, D.C., Vancouver, Toronto, San Francisco, Portland, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Miami, Memphis, Los Angeles, London, Detroit, Dallas, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, Boston, Bloomington, Indiana, Austin, and the ATL, Atlanta. Sadly, not in time for the Super Bowl, but hopefully I'll be coming on down there this year. Get your tickets today and help bring me to your city. Go to manwhorepod.com/tour. I've already started brainstorming the different types of shows I could do in various cities. So that's pretty cool. Last week I talked about organizing gangbangs. Yeah, so those happened. So I last week I was talking about I organized a couple gangbangs for some strangers who contacted me to help them fulfill their fantasies. So, we did that. Friday was a beautiful, wonderful night. It kind of went off without a hitch. It was controlled chaos at its finest. Really dug it. And then we did another one on Sunday night, and that was pretty kick-ass too. I'll say Sunday night was a little clunkier because we had a lot of dudes cancel early that day, or in the I had dudes cancel after the thing started. It was weird. But then what was more annoying is I had a bunch of dudes just not show up and also not cancel. And that shit is fucking rude. Really threw off my whole organizational structure. I was supposed to have 30 guys come through to run train on this girl. And, I think we only had, including myself, 13. And some of you might be like, oh my God, 13 dudes? That's way too many. Personally, I agree, but this nice lady wanted a lot more than that. So hey, next time you get them next time. But that's just rude, everybody. I mean, I don't care if it's a date, a gangbang, an interview. Don't do the no show, no call. Okay. I saw this article, and of course, by article I mean I saw a headline on Twitter that I did not read the rest of, but I did see the headline. No. I did actually take a peek at some of it. Apparently, my generation or the generation below me, a combination of the two, apparently us millennials have taken ghosting to an unacceptable level where we're also not showing up for interviews and we're not canceling interviews. Or they're getting job offers, like, and then they accept the job and then they just don't show up to work. Or like people, instead of going through the uncomfortable process of formally quitting your job, there are like these people in their mid-20s who are just not, they just stop going to work. Instead of like writing a fucking email saying I quit. And I fucking hate that. Ugh. It's like, what are you doing? Because it's not only cowardly. It's like, well, you also not make eye contact. You're just scared of human interaction that doesn't take place on a phone. But not only is it's not only cowardly. It's also just rude. It's inconvenient for the people you're ghosting on. I don't even like calling it ghosting, because if you stop showing up to work instead of quitting, and that's your way of quitting, if you don't show up to a date, if you don't show up to the gangbang you said you were coming to, ghosting sounds too cute for that. You're just an asshole. I want to get rid of the term ghosting and just go back to calling it what it used to be, which was, yeah, this person didn't show up. What a fucking asshole. We were counting on you, dudes. But the gangbangs were good. They were fun. And the girls had a great time. They were thrilled. They sent me very nice thank you text messages later, like the next day, being like, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for organizing a gangbang for me. It just meant so much. Like the woman on Friday night, like after we were done, she took me out and bought me tacos. That was her way of saying thank you. It's pretty dope. Yeah. Then Sunday night, some of the guys did both gangbangs. One of whom, I'll just call him Jay. Not that his name isn't already generic enough, but Jay came to both, and then Jay came to my roast battle Sunday night after the gangbang. Then we like hung out, and we literally closed down the bar till 4 a.m. So like I've made new friends, everybody. Isn't that nice? All right, people. I got this one email I just want to read. It's a quick one. It's a quick email. I don't know how to say the name, so I'm just going to call you G. Gisle, Gisley. Don't know what it is, but here are your words. He writes, I think it's a he. He writes, I am a sex positive 38-year-old male from Norway, and I have been listening on your podcast for about 2 to 3 years now, and just want to say thank you for the show. Side note, if I had the ability to do a Norwegian accent, would totally do it here, but I'm not going to subject you to that. I have not heard all of the podcasts, but probably about 100 to 150 episodes. Dude, gee, that is so much of my voice in your ears. You'll get a medal. Don't worry. You did great. He says, my favorites are the 2 episodes about the swingers couple, which is, those are great. I miss her. The swingers couple, oral auditions, the Desire episode, my interview with Kevin Allison, and the interview with the female porn director who directs gay porn. That was Mr. Pam, G. Mr. Pam. She's wonderful. It has been really enlightening to hear about sex, women, and what is generally going on. It has helped me to a better sex life and better understanding of my wife. So I just want to say thanks for a good show and stay slutty. Best wishes, G. Norway in the house. All right. I remember at some point, I think a couple years ago, I used to look in my downloads, and I would look for the countries where the downloads showed I had like 1 listener, because I would have like 80 downloads in Malta, something like that. And then I would put the call out and say, hey, if you're listening to me from Malta, can you write in? Because I just want to know who this one person is. So it looks like we found at least one of the Norwegians. Although I will say this, I do think I've got this like odd little cluster of Nordic folk who listen to the podcast. I think that's pretty cool. I got some patrons with like letters in their names that I don't know what they're called, like the O with the slash through it. I don't know what that is. I don't even know how to type that. But that's in her name. And I'm like, all right, cool, rocking. Shout out to Guru. I'm going to take the briefest of moments to tell y'all a little bit about hotmovies.com. Hey, y'all have come through for me on hotmovies.com. Apparently, y'all have been signing up. Y'all have been at least trying out that free trial, like you should, and watching some ethical paid-for porn or free trial porn. And I just want to say, shout out right now to you. If you have a free account at hotmovies.com, you're getting a shout out right now. May I recommend, they have, I was told to plug an exclusive video that they have right now. It's nowhere else except at hotmovies.com at the moment. Romantic Rimming. And I just love that title. I have bookmarked it. I'm going to watch it later. I guess it's exactly what it sounds like, because just we all know how much Billy likes getting his butthole licked, right? It is one of like my favorite things to receive. And just the romantic part hits me in all the feels. So I'm just like, oh, it just feels like I feel like I'm going to watch someone like eat ass and then cuddle. And that is my perfect porno. Yeah, so Romantic Rimming, it is starring Gina Ferocious, Penelope Cum, Sarah Sultry, and Sylvagia. Sylvagia, who are you? I want to learn. A Russian-born porn star. Okay. She's got some booty on her. Well, hotmovies.com, if you don't know, is a pay-per-minute porn site where you can watch ethical and affordable pornographies. Instead of managing a bunch of different subscriptions, $20 a month here, $25 a month at that one, $15 a month over there, look, you can just buy a bunch of minutes so that you're only paying for the minutes that you actually watch. And they couldn't have more variety. They got videos from all your favorite porn stars, all your favorite studios, with probably any fetish that you're interested in, because seriously, they have amputee porn on the site. So they literally have everything, okay? And hotmovies.com is going to give you 20 extra minutes on top of any package you sign up for when you use promo code MANWHORE. That includes their 20-minute free trial that turns into a 40-minute free trial when you use promo code MANWHORE at hotmovies.com. All right. Before I get to my guest this week, Jase Lindgren from Multiamory, it's time for the fan whore appreciation moment. Oh, yeah. This is a fun one because, Jayce and I, our shows share a lot of listeners, and I've learned that we also share a lot of patrons. So that's pretty fucking cool, right? So, hey, shout out to all my fan whores who are also in the Multiamory Facebook group, which I'm also in because I am a patron of theirs. That is a creator I support on the platform. But right now I want to give a shout out to some of the people who are enjoying my wonderful rewards on Patreon. Right now I want to give a shout out to Ron John, who has like just the porniest porn name ever. Most people think that like a porn name needs to have something like really like explicit. And no. Ron John. It's so subtly pornographic. It's perfect. Thanks so much for your support, dude. I hope you're enjoying the perks. Shout out to Nathan Cole Connor. You down with NCC? Yeah, you know me. You down with NCC? Yeah, you know me. OPP was my go-to karaoke song in college. Shout out. Thank you so much, Nathan. Hope you're enjoying everything. And also a shout out to Afton Kennedy. Your patronage, short-lived, but you stuck around enough for a Sexual Achievement Sunday, and I was really thrilled to see you in there. And you too can become a member and enjoy a slew of great rewards for as little as $1 a month. You get access to these private sex-positive discussion groups like the Peep Show and the Champagne Room. You get access to exclusive bonus episodes of the Man Whore Podcast, including a bonus episode tomorrow with this week's guest, Jase Lindgren. You also get so much more. All you got to do is head on over to patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. And now for this week's guest, Jase Lindgren from the Multiamory podcast. I actually myself was a guest on Multiamory several years ago, and that was a really fun time. Jase does this show. It's all about polyamory with his co-hosts, Emily Matlock and Dedeker Winston. And all three of them, actually, once upon a time, were a triad. Yeah, they were dating, did the show. Then they parts of that triad broke up. And then they still did the show, which I find so very fascinating. But Jase is good people. Jase, he talks a lot like online, on Twitter, on Facebook. Talks a lot about like masculinity, and that's a thing, I really relate with him on, and I feel like we've had some good discussions both on the pod and off, because he and I, we look like men. Jase and I look like the men who are upset about that Gillette ad, but we're not. And so it's really nice when I get to talk to him about this stuff. So yeah. Let's go ahead and get to me with Jase Lindgren. Gosh, I hope I'm saying his name right. Every time I say his name in my head, I'm always assuming I'm saying it wrong. But let's go ahead and get to me and Jase. I think I asked some sort of like masculine question at your live show back in April. I was like, how do I fight against the fact that everyone thinks I'm the worst? Just based off of appearance.
Well, you are the worst. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole fucking rabbit hole. But I'm here right now with Jase from the Multiamory podcast.
Hey,
what's
good
up,
to be
dude?
here.
Yeah, good to finally have you on.
After 2 years, we finally made this happen.
Yeah, for sure. I had a blast on your show way back in the day, and I think there's a lot of people here now listening to both shows just because.
Yeah, we've got a lot of crossover for sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of patron crossover, which is fun.
Yeah, especially since we're at PatreonCon right now, talking to a bunch of Patreon creators. Which is awesome. It's
pretty wild. Well, actually, I loved about. You guys were kind of the inspiration for me doing a Facebook. You guys were. I lifted that from you guys, just doing a private Facebook group. I was like, oh, cool, that's a thing people should do.
Right.
And then I actually joined yours because you guys do a polyamory podcast, and I needed a poly outlet support network, and your Facebook group for your patrons is fantastic for that.
Yeah, I feel for a lot of people that's been kind of the thing that really changed for them was having a support group, having a place where they could talk about it.
Yeah.
Or especially when it's hard, a place where you can talk about, I'm really struggling with this, thing that's going on right now. And that you get answers from people who are yeah, I've been there, I understand, instead of, fuck off, you have 2 girlfriends, you can't complain about anything, you know what I mean?
Right. Or just even if you have some questions, my friends are all pretty much comics, if they're not in the sex pause world, so I can't go to them with stuff because they're dude, I don't know, man, your orgies are weird, what's happening?
Right.
So it's
people who get it.
Yeah, and you've been doing Multiamory about the same amount of time as us, 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, just a little over 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and before you had the podcast and your own network of fans, where was your support network? What was your poly place to be?
Yeah, honestly, at that time, I didn't have a great support network. I was fortunate that I was living in LA at the time, and so there's a gazillion polyamory meetup groups and things like that. So those were nice, but I honestly wasn't going to a lot of those then. Yeah. I've found more of those to be really helpful later on, and I also travel a lot now, so whenever I'm in a new country or a new city, I'll try to go to a polyamory meetup there and kind of see what's this like here? How are people talking about it differently here than they are in LA?
Yeah. And how long have you identified as polyamorous?
I want to say 7 years, about that. Yeah.
What was that mind blowing moment? Because I know I was very resistant to the label,
right?
And I was resistant to the label because I hadn't done it. I hadn't quote unquote done polyamory. I knew I was non-monogamous, but I was well, I haven't had multiple girlfriends. I haven't had one in a long time. Maybe I should focus on one before I do 7. Right. So that always made me hesitate. What was your aha moment
Honestly, for me, there were kind of two different aha moments. The first one was actually 10 years before that. Wait, do I have this timeline right? Gosh, this would have been like 2003 or something. So
I just expect Dedeker to be like knocking on the door, be like, "God damn it, Jase, get it right, come on." No,
she's so much better with dates and stuff than I am. That's true.
It was April 17th, 2011.
Right? Yeah, probably she would know that. No, so this was like in 2003 or something, and I read the book "Stranger in a Strange Land." Was that one? Robert Heinlein is the author of that. Anyway, we'll talk about it later.
Okay,
it's a sci-fi. It's a sci-fi book, but
I thought that was like a poly book I was supposed to know.
No. It's a science fiction book written like in the 50s, and it basically in it there's a conversation about jealousy. And before that, I was like, very Christian. Had been waiting till marriage, like all through high school, and then in college, finally had sex, but was still considered myself a Christian and kind of more conservative and I would identify as a jealous person back then. And I read this book, and there was this part where he was talking about jealousy being like, people think that jealousy and love are related to each other, but he was saying actually they're opposites of each other. Because if you love someone, that means that you really want them to be happy. And jealousy, where you're trying to control and limit what they can do that makes them happy, that those two things can't go together. And that for me was like that like mind-blowing moment that just changed everything about how I looked at relationships. It just, I guess, hit me at the right time. Yeah. So I did some, kind of non-monogamy, more swingery sort of stuff, like with some partners then. But it wasn't until much later, then the second mind-blowing moment was when Emily and I opened up our relationship, and we were just doing like an open relationship.
And Emily's one of the co-hosts of your podcast. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Emily is one of the co-hosts of the podcast. We were together and monogamously, and we opened up our relationship, had no fucking clue what we were doing, and started like reading books and looking stuff up, and discovered polyamory, and discovered like, fuck, there's people who do this already, and like work on doing it better, and like figuring this stuff out. This isn't some weird pipe dream or something you only do when your relationship's, going down the drain. Yeah. It's just sort of a last ditch effort or something. And to go, oh my God, people actually do this and it works. Like, so that was kind of the second big mind blowing moment.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met someone who had done anything like non-monogamously that I met in the real world. Cause like previously when I was like, cause I was in college when I first met someone like that, she was like 46 or something. I don't know. She's like in her late 30s and she, actually was Jen, who you all may remember from like a year and a half ago. And like previously anyone who'd done anything wild, it was like through Craigslist. It was like, well, you go to a gangbang. It's like, yeah, they're clearly kind of non-monogamous, but like they're Craigslist people. But I just met her at a bar and started talking. And when she went to the bathroom, her friend was all like, you should know, like her and her husband used to be swingers. Which like her friend's being salacious about it, but like I had already been feeling like monogamy wasn't what I wanted to do at 20 for a couple years. And it was the first time I met someone who does it and seemed like a healthy, normal person, got kids, right? Like a marriage and the husband's cool. And I was like, oh, like I'm not crazy. I'm not broken. I'm not weird for thinking that.
Yes, that moment. I feel like so many people have that, either like they'll message us after listening to our podcast and be like, oh my, like I'm not broken.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with me.
Or I'm not selfish.
Right. Like all those things. Yeah. Like finally getting that, like, oh, people do this and it can be a healthy thing, because there's just so much baggage that's put on us about anything that doesn't look the one certain way that we're all supposed to think is the most romantic or the most normal.
Yeah. It's like, the whole construct of everything you believed in goes away. It's like the first time I feel like a comedian sees someone sit on the stool. It's like, wait, you can just sit on the stool or you can leave it in the mic stand? I gotta redo everything. No, but it's like they have like changing something that is such at a core of what you believe or think. Like, I don't know, like, was that scary for you?
Gosh, no, honestly, for me, it felt like more of a relief. It was just that, like, oh my gosh, I can actually do this thing that there's always been a part of me that wished I could do or felt drawn to, but just didn't think it was possible.
Sure. Were you or Emily more along before that when y'all discovered this, or were we kind of like on the same track, same time? Like, what, or was one ahead?
Right. For what happened with us was,
I don't know the Multiamory like folklore. I didn't start from the beginning and binge forward. I kind of just jumped on it.
you got to study up.
Anytime I have a question, I just like text Kenzie. I'll be like, "What's this mean?" Or like, "Hey, like, is that who does the theme song? Is that that's Jace's brother?" Okay,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so for us, we'd been together at that time for I think 2 years when we opened up our relationship, and we both started reading books and things being like, how do we do this? I don't know what we're doing. And we both read different books. And we would have this experience where she would come to me being like, oh my God, I read this book. And it said this thing. Is this what you want? Like, is this the thing that you're saying that you want? And I'd be like, I don't know. I was reading this other book that said this totally different thing. I thought it was maybe more like this. Like, I don't know. We were just so blind, we were so lost. But what happened for us was that, I went on some dates and had one person who I actually, saw a few times, who like had some kind of a relationship with. And Emily went on a bunch of dates with, people from OkCupid that were awful, just assholes, right? People who just read polyamory as like, oh, you're just DTF, saying awful things to her. She had a really bad experience of it. And so what ended up happening is that kind of caused this, I don't know, like a disconnect or like a rift in our relationship. And we actually ended up closing our relationship again after, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 months of doing that. Again, Emily would be like, no, it was actually 5 months and 26 days. But
women, am I right? No, okay, sorry.
More like me, am I right?
Sorry, okay.
She tells me every time, like any date in the past to me is the other day. I'll be like, all right, the other day we were talking about this thing. She'll be like, that was 3 years ago. To me, like everything is the other day.
Like, there was a different president when that happened. What are you talking about, Jase?
Exactly. Anyway, so we closed our relationship again. And for us, that worked out because I wasn't still seeing that woman who I'd been dating. Like that had just kind of not worked out. We just stopped seeing each other as much. And so it wasn't like I had to go break up with someone for us to close our relationship. Instead, it was like, okay, let's not, and let's see how this, see how our relationship is. And then maybe another 6 months after that, all of a sudden she's like, hey, so I want to talk about this polyamory thing again. 'Cause here's the deal. There's this guy who I knew from the past. I forget if it was from high school or from college, but this guy who I'd always kind of liked. But we did that thing where like I would be dating someone or he would be dating someone and we were never both single at the same time. Yeah. But he's coming to town. He's going to be in San Diego.
I just really want to bang him.
And I mean, basically, yeah.
Really, please.
And I really, I want to try this thing. And so we talked about it for a few days. I was like, okay, but, if we're going to do this thing, let's really do it and not keep, like, opening and closing. Like, let's make a commitment to something. And so we talked about it for a few days before we decided, like, yes, let's do this. Kind of checking in, being like, what did we learn from before? What's different now. And anyway, we decided to do it. She goes down to San Diego, comes back the next day, is like glowing and is pumped. And she's like, I get it now. Like, it finally makes sense to me how you could go and have sex with someone else and come back and be like, I'm so stoked to come back to my other relationship. And like that it, makes me feel even more in love with you. And, this is amazing. And so then from then on, like we were kind of more on the same page. And
so like in that 6 month span, it sounds like there was work, like there's strengthening of the core relationship to make it possible to do that.
I don't think it was about that.
Then so what happened before that? Like what about before that she wasn't coming home? Like, was it because the dates were just bad, or?
I think it was partly just like unluckiness.
So this dude just had dates. Like the magic dick that like opened up to be like, yeah, you know what? Like, there are good dudes out there besides Jase too.
Yeah, I don't know if that was part of it or what, but yeah, it was just.
I'm just curious, like what the difference was in the two different openings ups.
Yeah, I think it was partly that for her the second time felt more on her terms, like there was something she actually wanted that it was helping her to get. as opposed to before where we were just sort of like, I don't know what we're doing, like what's happening. And she was just like, I don't know if I want to date this way. Like I'm getting mean messages from these guys or whatever, right? Like it just wasn't a good experience. And I think seeing like, oh no, this can actually work with people I know, like people that I want to see. And I think also part of that second experience was he was coming over to our place and I was going somewhere else. I was, getting out of, wait, shit, was that it? No, never mind. That was a later date.
Emily, do you have, no? Okay. Sorry. Do you have a, no. But don't you find that there's a lot of people who, when they start opening up the relationship, there's a lot of people who where like the impetus is more like, well, I met a person and I don't want to cheat, but like I really want to do something with this person. Like there's almost like, there's a lot I feel like there's so many people who like the impetus becomes like a specific situation, right, as opposed to being like, well, I'm feeling something in my core, Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. Yeah. I think for some people it's more just that feeling of like, I feel like there's more to relationships, like there's more to me than just being in this one monogamous relationship, or even just being in monogamous relationships at all. Say if you're not in a relationship right at the moment. But then there's other people, where it is very specific. It's a specific person. I was actually talking with a guy recently who his experience was that his wife, I think she might have been a girlfriend or fiance at the time, but she was the one who pointed out to him, she's like, hey, I think you're in love with your other friend over here. Let's talk about this. Yeah. And like that sparked the conversation. But yeah, there's lots of different ways it can look.
For sure. Something you brought up before was just how like, people see poly as DTF and women gotta go through a whole rigmarole of all sorts of things. But I mean, I think this is what I asked at the live show, and something I still run into, is how do I battle against this concept of like, I'm a poly straight guy who people are seeing as like, well, you're poly and you're straight and you're a man. So like, you're just trying to bang a lot of chicks. And it's like, sometimes I just want to have sex with someone, but I also like romance and all that. So how to combat against that misconception up front?
Yeah. I mean, I've found that for me, a lot of that has come down to, I don't know the right words to put to it. It's like about thinking of everything of like flirting and dating and all that stuff as if it's just happening a lot slower. That for me, when I was monogamous, and also when I was, in my earlier days of polyamory, it's kind of that like you meet someone you're excited about, and it's that push to like get to where I want to get, right? This very like goal oriented approach to dating that I think is taught to guys, right? Like if you listen to any like pickup artisty stuff, there's that, I forget the term, it's like pushing and pacing or leading and pacing or something. And it's this idea that like the man should always be trying to push forward and escalate, and that the woman's the one who's like holding back and pacing. And it's just such
romantically
sexist, awful bullshit. No, like sexually,
sexually,
or sexually specifically.
Because like romantically, I would say like the expectation is reversed.
Sure,
like right, it's like, oh well, the woman's supposed to be leading the way towards a relationship, and the dude's supposed to be like,
all this bullshit. Yeah, it's just awful. Like just that we have all these institutions telling us that that's like how it should be. And I unfortunately, fell prey to that, of being like, even if it's not, in that like really overtly bad way, but being like, yeah, I should be the one kind of pushing this forward. And for me, a big shift was when I kind of realized how much bullshit that was, and could kind of take this step back to be like, I'm going to let the other person make the moves just as much as I am, right? If not more, and be like, the advantage of polyamory for me, or like one of the many advantages, is that it's not like I've got to lock this person down now before they get taken. Yeah. Or I've got to take advantage and like have some sex now while I'm single, right? Those are both things that happened to me when I was monogamous.
Because you'll be like, I think in the next 2 weeks, Samantha and I are going to lock it down. So I got 2 weeks to like go fuck Jennifer.
Right.
is like it's like oh fuck, I gotta go get it now. I gotta go binge, before I gotta start this diet or whatever.
Yeah, kind of like that. That's a good analogy actually, like the binge before you start a new
I will
diet.
always make a dieting analogy until I feel thin and pretty. It will always be a dieting analogy.
But with the advantage with polyamory is that like I don't have an expiration date. And neither does anyone who I'm dating, assuming that they're polyamorous, right? I mean, obviously, if you're trying to date someone who's monogamous, that might happen. That they end up dating someone and then you can't date them anymore. But it was just that, like realizing that everything could happen a lot slower because there's no rush. And for me, that changed a lot of how I would approach people, how I connect with people. And I'm saying people because I am someone who identifies as pansexual, even though most of my relationships have been with women. But it's just that, because then it's like, hey, I actually want to talk to you and get to know you, and I'm not in a rush to have sex with you because I know we can do that whenever we want. Sure. Right?
But do you have like people who view you as like, oh, he's a poly guy, he's trying to just get it in, or? I mean, I also don't know your like casual sex practices. Like, if you're just like inherently like, if you're typically more of like the slower speed romantic type, I feel like that's almost a little easier once you get through that initial threshold. But like for someone like me, yes, sometimes I have casual sex and sometimes I like dating, and those things all overlap. Yeah. And so I think there's always this concern of like, well, he like was tweeting about like a crazy, stranger place scene he did. And so he's probably just going to try to do that with me. And it's like, no, like I want to go on a date with you. Yeah, no,
that makes sense. That especially like if you are putting it out there publicly, or I could imagine even just within your social circle, if their friends are like, oh yeah, he always just hooks up with these people, he'll do the same to you. And you're like, no, I actually do want to date you.
Like being a poly guy, I think people, I don't know if it's the man whore thing or the poly stuff or a combo, but like, I think people think I fuck way more than I do. Like people are like, oh, Presida's just fucking all the time. I'm like, I mean, not really. But it is a hard thing to push back against. And I still find it. I met someone at a wedding who like ultimately she just assumed I just wanted to sleep with her, and I was like, you didn't even ask. Like we met at a wedding. We live in different states. Like like while you're in town for a day, maybe like let's have a drink, and like if we hook up, cool. But you're like fun to talk to. But you also just didn't ask. Like you should, like just ask me. Like, do you have an intention at all? Like, and they don't do that. They just jump to like, well, he's the slutty boy trying to bang.
Yeah. The thing is, I feel like for women who date men, they're not used to getting a straight answer from that question anyway. So why would they bother asking you?
Sure, that's fair. That's fair.
Like, because unfortunately, like if you just, and I know you've done a lot of this on your show probably, but just like listening to women more talk about their stories of dating men, specifically women who date men, right? Yeah. And being polyamorous, it's been great to actually be able to talk in depth with my own partners as they're dating other guys or about their experience dating men. And you just realize how fucking shitty it is.
The first time I did, you're Redditor, right? You're on Reddit a bit, right?
A little bit, yeah. I try to stay away.
First time I discovered creepy PMs, r/creepy PMs was like, it was that was the mind blowing moment. I was like, oh, this isn't just like Alice overreacting to like a thing. Like, oh, this is rampant.
Awful. Yeah. The more you listen to women's experiences of dating, or even just like being a human in this world,
like existing in the world,
right? The more you're just like, fuck. Like, if you actually sit and listen and not just try to like, logic it away, which a lot of guys try to do because it's uncomfortable, you're just like, fuck, man, this is shitty. Yeah. This is real shitty. And so with that in mind, if you are going to be a man who dates women, I feel like you can't just chalk it up to like, well, they needed to ask me, or like, fuck them. Like, why didn't they ask me? Right. It's like you kind of got to find some way to be proactive about that and like prove that you can have that conversation in a way that's not reactive, that's not manipulative, that's not, you know what I mean? And that's a hard thing to do, to show someone that that's not what you're trying to do.
Yeah. You mentioned before, like, you're clarifying about like people versus just like women. Like, did you previously identify as straight?
Yeah, I identified as straight for, well, identified as straight until college when I was like, maybe I'm bi. I don't know. And I was not as aware of gender stuff, which is why I use the term pansexual now.
Sure.
But yeah, so for me, that was kind of being straight was like more my identity for most of my life until only more recently, I guess maybe a few years ago, since being poly actually, really was like, no, I am going to embrace this side of myself and not be scared of it, and like came out to my family and stuff like that. So
okay, I hadn't known if there was like that the pondering that you described in college or not, because so I still identify as straight, but there's like I had an ex recently who came out in the middle of the relationship as genderqueer. So I was like, and then that made me have to go look like, what does that mean in relationship to me? Like, what does that say about my day? Does that change anything even? And then is it bad if it doesn't, right? Because like, am I not affirming their identity if I don't identify differently? It's
that's
like
an interesting question. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
Like, if I don't change to identify as pansexual, am I like, erasing their gender identity or what?
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, like Billy's straight, but if I start hooking up with like, I've and since then, all of a sudden, like I found myself with like people who use they them pronouns. I'm like, well, I've had some training now, okay, but then it's like, am I not affirming that identity by still identifying as straight? Because I'm like, well, I'm just, I think Dan Savage is one of the people who brings up switching to like gynophiles or like philia, whatever right? It's like
phallophiles.
Yeah, it's like, well, like I'm into pussies on like feminine-ish looking women, and then I'm like, well, not even feminist, because they're pretty androgynous, and so it's like I'm in the vulvas. Like I'm a vulva guy. Hey, it's are you a boobs guy? I'm a vulva dude.
That's the thing. It's like when you really get down into it, it's just the labels of straight and all of it just kind of are like, we don't fucking know. Like, we don't, what does that even mean? It is a weird thing that unfortunately we do put a lot of, like, there is a lot of value on having the non-straight labels to show like, this is a real thing. I'm not just like a broken straight person. Like, I think there's value in having these other labels, but honestly, all of it is just sort of, really depends. You don't know, right? You might be like, no, I'm straight, or you might be like, no, I'm a gynophile, like I just love vaginas. And then you meet a beautiful trans woman who has a penis, and you're like, but she's fucking hot, and I'm
already dealing with that right now. It's like I had a guest on the show where I was like, fuck. Okay, that's a thing I have to deal with in my head now. It's like,
Right. And you're just sort of like, none of these labels make any sense anymore. Like, all of it's bullshit. It's just, we're into who we're into.
But anything that threatens like the identity of being straight now, as a man, especially as we're like men who look like the like ideas of men. Like we
beards.
We could help people move. Like we don't look. Like we don't look like, we can't look at Jim. He can't, he'll sit in the car and watch it, It's like, and so when you're not like a straight man, that automatically there's a questioning of like a masculinity or and therefore worth. And, it's just a whole scary thing. Like I don't know. And so I'm really starting to rethink something. Or like I sit down with like a really hot trans woman. I'm like, I think that, it's so odd, like how like tied some of us, especially even like me, like I'm tied to this fucking label. I don't want to let go,
Yeah, it's funny. I wonder what it is exactly that people are afraid of letting go of their labels.
Being treated like people who like being the way minorities are treated in this country.
Is it that? You think it's just that it's like,
I think that might be
how shitty I treat everyone else, and so like I don't want other people to treat me that way? Or like,
if I'm being totally honest, I think part of it, especially with like being the guy who goes to sex parties and who is open-minded about sexuality and gender and people and experience, right, and all that stuff, I'm worried about being a trope. I think as a straight guy, I represent something that like, like more of us can do this and it's okay, and you are not less of a man, whatever. If I came out as say pansexual or something, be like, we knew the whole time. See, only the queers are thinking this way as straight dudes. We don't have to, right? And I think that's been since I started the podcast, something it's a nugget in the back of my head that sometimes pops out. I think way more than who am I? Do I have to go, dress better or something,
Right. No, that makes sense. I've definitely found a similar thing with our podcast where it is sort of that question of like, who is this for? Like, who is this podcast for? Who am I trying to help? And it's changed and evolved, and that is a tricky question.
Yeah.
Because it's like I do want to feel like I'm not pushing away the cis male straight white guys who I feel like could really benefit from a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show.
Because you look like them.
Because I look like them, right? And like I said, I mostly date women, and so I really look like them, and I have the experiences of them. And so I do want, them to be able to come and find the show and learn something from it, right? And like actually like be a better human being, right?
We just want people to be slightly better humans.
Slightly better humans would be great. Make a big difference.
It's a great t-shirt. Slightly better human right here.
I like that. I'll go print those right now.
What fascinates me about your show from when I first learned about it and learned the concept and then learned what the relationship dynamics were at the present day from when I first found out was that, you had started off like as a I know you guys don't like the word throuple. Do you prefer triad or what's the?
I would say triad over throuple any day.
Yeah, I know you guys do not like that word. He's like, well, that's poly 101 throuple. Okay.
Right.
But then there was a breakup, right?
Yeah.
So which relationships broke off?
Right. So when there've been a few over time,
Sure.
but when we first started the podcast, I would actually at the time have identified us as being part of a quad. Because there was also another guy who both Dedeker and Emily were dating.
Did y'all edit him totally out of the show, change the album artwork or something?
No, he didn't want to be part of the show because he was like, I don't want polyamory to be part of my identity. Like I don't want that to be what people find when they search for me. And so he's like,
Right.
I don't want to be part of the show. And part of our decision in doing the show was like, we're going to use our real names. We're going to be out. We're not going to hide behind pseudonyms like all the other polyamory podcasts did at the time.
Yeah.
We're all kind of behind pseudonyms. And we're like, no, like that's the point of this is we're going to be like, this is a normal, like not some deviant thing that we need to be ashamed about and hide about. But anyway, so then not too long after the podcast started, Emily and him broke up. And then a little while later, Dedeker and him broke up. And so then we were a triad for a little while. And then Emily and I, was then another like year later or something, Emily and I broke up. But Dedeker and I were still together. And Emily and I broke up and had this kind of transition to, well, we're coworkers and we're still friends and we still love each other a lot, but, she's in this other relationship and isn't in one with me and was going to move out because we were living together at the time. And honestly, it was a hard transition. For us, it was about 6 months. When like 6 months later, we went to a concert together that we had tickets for from like before, right?
Oh, that's hilarious. That's like my fucking Desire Resort where I was supposed to bring like, yeah, in 9 months, we'll totally be together. And then
that didn't work out. So it was like that. And it was to see Florence and the Machine at the Hollywood Bowl. It was an awesome show, by the way. But Emily and I went to that and we were on the bus back to the parking area from the Hollywood Bowl. And we're like, this was nice and wasn't weird. I think we finally made it to that point where it's not going to be super weird all the time.
Okay.
So for us, it was about that like 6 month mark.
Was it weird doing the show though?
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
like honestly, we like the doing the show was good, but often like after recording,
You're like,
no, like one or the other of us would cry or like just because the stuff we talk about on the show is very like real, right?
Yeah.
It's very serious stuff about relationships. And we're talking about it mostly in the abstract, but it's related to the stuff we're going through and what's going on in our lives. And there was, like moving is stressful and breakups are stressful. And like she was doing both of those because she was moving out. I was having to find roommates. Like, there's like all these things going on where it was a really difficult time. And then, that got better. And right after that, Dedeker was like, hey, I'm going to go travel the world and probably never live in LA again. And so I'm like, fuck. Like, so then there was a whole transition for that, right? Of just like that taking time to get used to what our relationship looks like. And now it's awesome. And she and I we fucking rule at long distance relationships now because we have a lot of experience with it. But like I was able to change my life around to be able to travel more with her, which has been amazing. But it's just like there've been a lot of transitions over the course of this show to this point now where we started as a triad or maybe 3/4 of a quad to now where Dedeker and I are together, but we're only physically together maybe half the year.
Sure.
And then neither of us are dating Emily anymore. But, still do the show and still feel super close with her. I would say actually Emily and my relationship is better now than it ever was when we were in more of a conventional relationship.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Keith and the Girl?
No, I don't know that one.
It's a daily comedy podcast, they do 5 times a day, and they've been doing it for like 13, 14 something years.
Wow.
They just got into like the podcast Hall of Fame. Like I was like, how do you do that long? It's like if you guys hear me doing this in 14 years, like let's just have a sit down and make sure this is a good idea.
Make sure Billy's okay.
Yeah. So they started off the show, and this is before even podcasting was podcasting, but they started a podcast and they were dating. They were a couple. Mm-hmm. And then their show got big because they were early adopters of the medium. And so they got really big. They got, deal. They quit their jobs. They got a book deal, and they wanted, the book deal was about relationships. It was like, write a book about relationships.
Right.
Cool. They write the book. In the course of that, they break up.
Right.
But in the contract, I'm actually very curious to know what I feel like you guys. I feel like you guys have talked about that on the show, like what Dedeker likes contract stuff. But in the contract, it said if you guys break up, you cannot publicly acknowledge said breakup until 6 months after the book comes out.
Wow.
So I think it was it was longer than 6 months that they had to hide it from their fans because, they were still finishing the book and the book had to come out.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, they had to they didn't pretend to love it, but they had to pretend they did not just break. And 5 times a day, dude.
Yeah.
5 times a week, every fucking day they had to go and be like, oh, we can't, we have a big secret and we're not necessarily pleased with each other.
Sounds awful.
Yeah. And then when they finally could, they came out and they told their fans and oh my, were they mad. So what was the fan reaction to when you and Emily broke up?
So we didn't talk about it at first.
Okay.
Because we were also trying to figure it out ourselves. So we didn't talk about it on the show. Our show also is generally it's not a show where we go on and talk about our personal lives a lot. It's more like we're talking about particular topics.
But you do draw from
tools.
personal examples.
Absolutely. And we have more recently started doing some episodes where we talk more personally about our own experience because we found that people really resonate with that. And they're like, I really like hearing that you're a human and like hearing your real stories too.
Yeah.
But we eventually did an episode, like a few months after that where Emily and I did an episode talking about, our breakup and kind of that process. And the best reaction was that someone in the Polyamory subreddit posted, I just listened to an episode of Multiamory and found out that Jase and Emily broke up. This is, what do you say? This is as bad as when Helena Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp broke up. Wait, who was it?
Tim Burton.
Tim Burton. Sorry, right. Like Tim Burton and Helena
It's also
Bonham Carter
that's the celebrity couple that you were attached. You were like, they represent love to you. Okay, that's interesting.
Anyway, that was my favorite. It was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to think. This is as bad as that.
Was there an announcement at some point where you're like, hey guys, just like an FYI, if you haven't picked up, we broke up. Now we're going to talk about, online dating and poly.
No, like I said, we talked about it on that particular episode. Okay. And occasionally when it comes up, we'll mention it. And it often comes up in interviews because it is something that people usually just assume we're a triad. And so they'll usually ask that question and we can be like, actually, nope, we're something else.
Yeah.
And so, it comes up then, but it's not something that we actively felt like, because again, it wasn't like, hey, try to be like us because we do this better than you. It was more like, hey, let's explore these topics and look at tools and have guests and understand how to do relationships better more generally rather than be more like us.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like we've sold you a lie like those guys. I'm sure their fans felt like you've been telling us we need to be more like you, and it's been a lie all along, right? Like, that would be devastating.
You told us to buy the book. I spent $15.99 on the book.
It's all a lie. You don't know how to do relationships.
Yeah, but wait, but isn't that the whole thing? Where it's like, oh, if a relationship ends, it means it was bad, or you didn't know. It's like, but no, like maybe that's just the thing, that relationship had to end, or in y'all's case, like transition into a friendship relationship.
Right, definitely. And for myself, also now I identify as more of a relationship anarchist.
Oh boy, yeah, we're gonna get an explanation. Not that I disagree with it, it's more as like I still, when people ask me, I'm just like, I don't know. I am not the guy to ask. I don't have the answer.
It's funny. I think relationship anarchy is something that a lot of people within the world of polyamory are very curious about, but don't really understand. Like when we go to like polyamory conferences and stuff, it's like a few different workshops and things that we give. And the one that always has the biggest attendance is our Relationship Anarchy 101 presentation that we do. Because it is something people just like, tell me, I need to know.
Yeah, it sounds dangerous and cool. It's like...
No, I've said for a long time, I want someone to rebrand Relationship Anarchy, because I think the name gives a connotation that's actually not very accurate to what it is. But I'll give you my super quick explanation. Basically, it's saying... It's understanding that our society places this hierarchy on relationships, where a romantic, which also is a sexual relationship, there's this assumption that romance equals sex, that type of relationship trumps every other type of relationship, except maybe like a parent and child, right? Like certain family relationships. Like, and we all have had that experience of like, oh, I just got a girlfriend and now I don't hang out with my other friends anymore because she's the one I'm going to spend all my time with. Or I get a +1 to an event. If I don't have a romantic partner, I can't bring anyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's becoming less true. And I think that it should. But so the idea with relationship anarchy is saying, no, there are no like prepackaged relationships where it's like, we're going to be romantic, which means we have sex, which means we're eventually going to live together. It means we're going to share finances, like rather than buying a combo meal. Instead, it's a la carte. And that every relationship, like every person you know in your life is a relationship, right? Like you have a relationship with me. Right. You have a relationship with your mail carrier. You know, you have a relationship with
very close with my mail carrier.
Yeah.
Very
right.
Close.
That all of those are relationships, and what's involved in each relationship is the things that the two of you decide is going to be in that relationship. And that the importance of that relationship to you is just decided by how important that relationship is to you, not by this kind of prepackaged, I'm going to sign up for the, this cable package that gets me sex with you and romance with you and living with you. Or I'm going to buy this other package that's the friend package, which includes definitely can't have sex. We can do these things together though, and this is how I prioritize you, right? So it's instead stripping all that away and just being like, we're going to build each piece of this as we want to. And I found it's made my like friendship relationships so much better and so much more fulfilling. And that if I'm like, this weekend I want to hang out with my roommate and my good friend Eric, that's a fulfilling, great weekend. And not like, man, I had to hang out with my friend because my girlfriend wasn't around or something, right? Yeah. And we're taught to think that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that goes to what like I've been saying for just like, I don't know, I think even before I thought, I knew it was poly, it was like every relationship should be whatever 2 or 3 or 4 or 12 people want that one relationship to be. Like you just decide. And if our relationship is we are deep, close, platonic friends who fuck, or if we are, romantic partners, or if we are just whatever it is, you're my postal carrier, like that, just whatever you want that to mean.
Right.
And yeah, I just think all of it should just be whatever you want it to be, and stripping away the classic labels and whatnot. I think monogamous people are starting to branch out into that, realizing they don't have to default into monogamy. They can choose it. And they're allowed to make that choice. I don't know why you make that choice, but hey, you do you, boo boo. It's like you get to choose and stop like just taking what society gave you.
Right.
I like that.
And I think I was reading about some studies recently about like the phenomenon of bromances and like how millennial men are now having these much closer, more emotional relationships with their platonic male friends. And some people, like literally, I read 2 different articles about the exact same study. One of them being like, millennials are destroying marriage and they're going to ruin the family unit and all this stuff because men are confiding in their male friends instead of doing that with their girlfriends like they're supposed to. And then the other article being like, this is amazing. People are finally like breaking down these walls of like being able to share emotionally with another man, even if you date women, right?
Like just because you're being emotional with another man doesn't mean you guys are going to make out. But you're also allowed to make out if you want to. Like, yeah, but it's
right. But just this idea of like, let's take away some of these barriers we put up between, well, this is this category of relationship, so we can and can't talk about these certain things, right?
Yeah.
Just that. Like once you take that away, it's really changed things for me. And it actually has made it so I have less of those times. Tell me if you've ever had this experience where like you're not like you have a breakup and it's been a little while after that. Maybe you don't have a lot of partners right now. And there's that kind of desperate feeling of like, I got to get on OkCupid. I got to get on Tinder. I got to find somebody, right? Because I need to fill that emptiness in my life.
Yeah, so at times, yeah.
That I found that with like thinking about relationship anarchy more, being like, I don't feel that because I can get that same like enjoyment and connection time I would have doing something like going out on a really romantic date, staying in and playing video games with my roommate. Right. You know what I mean? Or like randomly texting my best friend in Seattle and being like, hey, I was just thinking about you. Like, how's your family doing? Like, what's up? And like getting that kind of intimacy met, even if it's not sexual, and then maybe having other people where it's like, we just have sex and we don't have a romantic relationship. Just realizing I don't need to like desperately seek this one particular type of package.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. Well, Jayce, I mean, thank you for. I'm glad we could finally connect. We're finally sharing a zip code. I want to give a shout out to Simplecast for their awesome booth here at Patricon, and they have very fancy mics that are way better than mine.
I'm excited to hear how this sounds.
I would love to use the last 10 minutes do a little bonus episode for Patreon if you're cool with that. But for now, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody else where they can find you and Multiamory.
Yeah, so Multiamory, you can find it at multiamory.com or, iTunes, Stitcher. Basically, if you just Google Multiamory, like, will be the thing you find.
I might, if you're on iTunes, you scroll to the bottom, I think I'm like, you guys are one of the recommended ones for like people who listen to me or whatever.
Right, we're in a similar world, I suppose.
Yeah. The socials,
everything is Multiamory.
Multiamory,
right? Twitter,
everything.
Instagram, like
you'll find it.
Instagram's like Multiamory
MULTI. AMORY.
Yeah, AMRY.
Yeah,
that's a little difficult.
Well, we'll everyone else will hear the rest on Patreon. But for now, why don't you go ahead and say goodbye to everybody?
All right, thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Oh, I wish I had more time that I could chit chat with Jayce. He's such a delight, so much fun to talk to. And like I said, it's really nice to talk to another man who kind of looks like man, and about the man things we're not supposed to be talking about. So that was pretty cool, man. I'd love to know what y'all thought about this week's episode. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm at the Billy Persida. Use the hashtag ManWhorePodcast. Let me know what you thought about this week's show. You can also go like the Man Whore Podcast Facebook fan page. For those of you who are not Twitter heads, I know you got a Facebook. You may say you hate Facebook, but you still have it, so you can go click like on that one. We post a lot of cool, fun content over there. And if you want to say something to me privately, you can shoot me an email with your comments, your questions, your boobies to manwhorepod@gmail.com. We got merch. Did you know we got merch? A great way to support the Man Whore Podcast and show off your fandom to your friends is to go get some Man Whore Podcast merch. We got Stay Slutty panties. We got I'm Saving Pegging for Marriage t-shirts. We got buttons, stickers. Go to manwhorepod.com and treat yourself to something nice. You may even get a personalized little thank you card. Who knows? Not really into the t-shirts? That fair. Still want to support the podcast? You're a good person. Become a member of my fan whore community on Patreon and receive a slew of great rewards. You can get access to private sex-positive discussion groups and bonus episodes of this show, including a bonus episode with this week's guest, Jase Lindgren. That episode will be coming out tomorrow and is available to all of my $5 and up fan whores. All you got to do to become a member for as little as $1 a month is go to patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/manwhorepodcast. Man, my voice is shot. It's starting to sound like I'm hitting puberty all over again. And last but certainly not least, wow, Tour de Man Whore. Bring the show to a city near you. Get your pre-sale discount tickets today by going to manwhorepod.com/tour. By the time you hear this, I will be in Las Vegas enjoying the Adult Entertainment Expo and the AVN Awards, chit-chatting with probably some of your favorite porn stars. Pretty stoked about the lineup. Looking at the board right now, who do we got? Now, don't hold me to all this because AVN is a pretty crazy, wild time. Shit changes at the drop of a hat, so who knows what's going to happen with the schedule. But some of the names I've got here, Riley Reyes, Kendra Sunderland, Nikki Delano, Jane Way, super excited to talk to Jane Way, Naomi Banks, Bree Mills, Rob Piper, Marcus London, and some more. You know, it's gonna be a good week. Got a lot of Man Whore podcasts I'm bringing to Vegas. So I can't wait to share those episodes with y'all later. Ship it a dop, stupid a doop boop bop bing, do babu da babu, and stay slutty.